So here we are now on doing the estimating of the uncollectible receivables. So we're on slide number 19 now, if you're following along. So what we're really talking about at this moment is, in the prior slides, we talked about you have to do an adjusting entry at the end of the period, right? So I mentioned maybe if the fiscal year end is 12/31, we have to do some kind of adjusting entry knowing that, hey, in the next year, there's likely going to be some people that do not pay us our money, right? They won't fulfill their obligation. So just to recall your memory, when we're doing the adjusting entry, sorry, when we're doing that adjusting entry on 12/31, no matter which method we use, so we'll go into that in a second, no matter which one we use, the journal entry or the template remains the same, regardless of method, okay? Which is going to be a debit to bad debt expense, and our credit will be to allowance for doubtful account, okay? Doesn't matter, right? So where we've been so far is we have two different methods, right? So we have the direct write-off method. And that journal entry looks like, hey, we decided that we're not going to be able to collect this money. That journal entry looks like bad debt expense, and then the credit is accounts receivable, right? And so then under the allowance method, which is required under GAAP, right? The allowance method calls for, first you need to do an adjustment, which we're talking about now. And that adjustment is at the end of the year, right? 12/31 would have you, and that's a debit to the bad debt expense and a credit to allowance for doubtful account. Now, when you write it off, I'm running out of space, but when you write it off, that write-off looks like, let's see, I'm gonna erase this. So once you decide that a customer will not pay you, that write-off looks like in the next year, right? In the next year, whatever it may be, that journal entry looks like a debit to allowance for doubtful account and the credit to accounts receivable. So that's what we learned in the prior slides. This is what we will focus on in this slide here, okay? So just kind of where we've been so far. All right, so it says the allowance method requires estimation of uncollectible accounts. And so this estimate could be based on past experiences, industry averages, and the forecast of the future. So what I can tell you now is that if I am in the retail business, right? We as Americans or in the US have been in the retail business for many years. And what usually happens when you're in the retail business for a long time, or any business for that matter, people are collecting data, right? And so when they're collecting data, it's to study something, right? And so for us, because they have been collecting data, they know how much in retail, what's the percentage of people that will not satisfy their debt, right? And so they have that across the board. And you can think of any industry, they have some kind of prediction or forecast as to maybe what percentage of accounts that will not be collected, right? After years and years of experience, right? So they can use their past experiences and all of that good stuff. All right, so regardless of the method they use or the averages or the forecast, it boils down to two different methods. One is the percentage of sales method, and the other is the analysis of receivable method. Okay, so let's look at both of them. All right, so let's first dive into the percentage of sales method. So the percentage of sales is you're looking at what percentage of your sales will likely not be collected, right? I would say this is probably the easiest method to estimate. I know I'm putting that out there, but I do feel like that because, again, you're going to have your sales amount, right, that you have, and then you're going to multiply it times the bad debt percentage, okay? All right, so let's look at this example. So assume the following data for Gucci Company on December 31st before any adjustments are made. All right, so you have your accounts receivable amount, you have your balance and allowance for doubtful account, and you have a total credit. And they're asking, what is your bad debt as a percentage of credit sales? Now, as illustrated up here, here, it won't draw, but what have you. The way you're going to come about that is you have your total credit sales, which is here, $3 million. And you're going to multiply this times our bad debt as a percentage of sale. Now, what you need to pay attention to is that this is 3/4 of 1%. So I'm going to draw this better, promise. So this is, again, 3/4 of 1%, right? So if 1% is 0.01, 3/4 of that is going to be 0.0075. Okay. So once we do that calculation, so I'm going to take a second and do the calculation with you guys as well. So if I did 3 million times 0.0075, you should come out with your bad debt expense of $22,500. Okay. And so that's what our journal entry will look like. Okay. So we've come up with that amount. So here it is. The adjusted entry for uncollectible accounts on December 31st is bad debt expense will be our $22,500, and the allowance for doubtful account will be of equal amounts of the $22,500. Okay. Now, what's important to add here is here. It says the allowance for doubtful account is credited, this amount, this $22,500, and added to the unadjusted balance. And so in our previous slide, the unadjusted balance, if you go with me or if you click over to the next slide, that balance was a total amount of $3,250 as a credit, right? So they're saying that we're going to add it to that balance of $22,500, right? And so that is going to be our balance within the allowance for doubtful account. Now that's very, very important, because you'll see in the example that we do together that matters, right? When we're doing the adjusting entry, and even as we move on to the analysis of receivables, that is very important. It is added, okay? Added, if I can stress that, okay? So what I'm going to do now is take a break, and we're going to start a new video. And in that video, we're going to tackle this. Of course, this could be found in your book, but just stick with me for a second, and we're going to go through this example. And you want to pay close attention to how I do this and how I solve this, because it's going to be completely different from the analysis of receivable amount, okay?